This video breaks my heart to make because I love GSC Suicune. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. It's always done so well for me. But ever since I had my realization that Zapdos is just as mandatory as Snorlax, meaning that every single optimal GSC team, whatever it is, needs to be Snorlax Zapdos plus 4, then every time I've tried to build with Suicune after that, I realize, hey, this cannot fit. Now, if you disagree with the Zapdos is mandatory thing, then I don't expect you to agree with the Suicune thing. But if you agree with the Zapdos thing, then I would love to be proven wrong about Suicune being able to find its way onto teams without cutting extreme corners. Because you can put anything onto a team without, if you're willing to cut corners like that, but then you're not really being optimal. And GSC is, in part, such a great balanced metagame because you don't have to cut corners in your team building. Not only do you not have to, but the rewards, if you do, aren't even that good because the power levels aren't that high. So, now, when I say Suicune, I mean Suicune as we traditionally know it, by the way, because I have seen glimpses of some players messing around with like Mirror Coat Suicune on offense, and I think that could be cool, but to this day, that has not proven itself as anything other than a gimmick. And, you know, I would love for that to start being, tried out some more. But when I say Suicune, I'm referring to it in its long-standing GSC guise of being one of the best pure walls in the tier and a fantastic Pokemon to have on stall teams. So, yeah, that's the role I don't think Suicune can viably fill anymore. So we'll approach this first by explaining what a standard GSC stall structure needs, right? So you got your Snorlax. Then you got your Skarmory, because you need it for Earthquake Snorlax. You can't cheat that slot with like a Growl, Miltank, or Charm Umbreon. Or, I guess theoretically you could cheat that slot with a Haze Reflect Dragonite, because that would also stop Belly Drum Snorlax. But that's also, yeah, I don't know about relying on that one, because it does literally no damage, and that's just going to make you extremely passive and unreliable. So we'll put a pin in that. We'll see if the Dragonite replacing Skarmory thing is viable later, but that's like a really fringe option. Now, if a fringe option is what it takes to bring Suicune's viability, I am happy to discover that over the course of this video. But I don't know. Also because I don't know that Haze Reflect Dragonite is, I mean, it's pretty much the closest thing to a pure Snorlax counter you're going to get. And it can also help against things like Machamp and Marowak, which is the primary concern with replacing Skarm with Miltank or Umbreon. Right? So let's say that for now we have the Skarm thing, and then see if Dragonite can open it up. So, you got Snorlax, you got Skarm, and then since Skarm doesn't handle Fire Lax, then you need a Fire Lax answer. So, this is usually a Ghost or a Rock type. So, Misdreavus, Gengar, because Gengar can fit on stall when supported by something like Light Screen Blissey, or Heal Bell Blissey with Rest Gengar. Actually, a very cool set. So, Misdreavus, Gengar, then the Rocks. Golem, T-Tar, Rhydon. Right? Those are your answers to Fire Lax. Theoretically, you could also do Curse Umbreon, Charm Umbreon or Growl Miltank in that slot, because if there is a Fire Lax, it is almost certainly not going to be a Fire Drum. It is not going to be a Drum Lax as well. Like technically, that set exists, but it hasn't been used seriously in like decades. It's more of a lip service on paper kind of thing. So if you face a Drum Snorlax, it's not going to have Fire, and if you face a Fire Snorlax, it's not going to have Drum. Therefore, Miltank or Umbreon can theoretically fill that Firelax checking slot for you, right? So you got Lax, Scarm, Firelax check, right? And then you've got Special Wall, because the Special Wall, either Raikou or Blissey, then that is going to help you answer Thunders, because Snorlax is not a reliable Thunder answer with spikes down. And GSC teams tend to have a bunch of special attackers, so you can't just rely on Lax. Things can go very hairy very quickly otherwise. So you've got Lax, Scarm, Firelax answer, Special Wall. Then you've got your Spiker, and sometimes also your Spinner. So at this point, you have Fortress or Cloyster, or if you want to go spikeless, Starmie. Now, some teams put spikes on Fortress or Cloyster, and then use Starmie in another slot. That's also generally kind of cool. Harder to fit nowadays, I think, if you also follow the Zapdos thing for similar reasons to the Suicune thing. But I used to like using that kind of thing, so use a Donut's team in this replay as an example, actually. That was very popular for a long time. So, yeah. So you've got Lax, Scarm, Firelax answer, Special Wall, Spiker/Spinner, and then that last slot has some leeway, right? And this is where you get flexible, and this is where something like Suicune would be perfect, because it fills a lot of slots. It checks various mixed attackers, and it just kind of stuffs things in general. Like, it helps against Vaporeon, it toxics it, so then your Raikou can switch in without taking a Surf, and it can just generally put opposing offense on a timer. That's one of the best things about it, because toxic immune Pokemon don't switch into Suicune, so you are able to force Zapdos to rest, and that lets you be, that puts you, means you're less on the back foot, right? So, and then in that slot, in that Suicune slot, you could also do something like Starmie. Okay, now, that last slot, that sort of flexible slot, whatever you want to call it, is also where Zapdos could traditionally be found on such stall teams. So you would have something like, take a look at my team in this replay, and then you put Blissey over Raikou, and then you have Zapdos in the last slot, right? Or instead of T-Tar, pretend it's a ghost type. Things like that. That's what a lot of GSE stall is, just like these little replacements. Or pretend the Fortress is a Cloyster, right? Because most of the time it is going to be Fortress or Cloyster. You're not going to go pure spikeless. I think that's very silly, and most GSC players will agree spikes are also required on most serious teams. If not all serious teams. I don't think those like Starmie, Drumlax, Marowak teams are very good, honestly. So I guess it depends what your opinion on those is. So let's just assume spikes, because most of the time you're going to be seeing it anyway. So, Lax, Fourier Cloy, Cooer Bliss, Rocker Ghost or Miltank or Umbreon, Scarm, last slot, right? Suicune, Starmie, you can run a Rock and a Ghost type if you want. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. You can run Miltank or Umbreon there for help. You can run like Scarm, Ghost, Umbreon, or Miltank, whatever, right? Flexibility. Now, if you this is all well and good until you put Zapdos as a requirement on this team, right? Because I do think that Zapdos requirement extends to stall. So you've got also because it'll help you not lose to Vaporeon, which is a major threat to a lot of stall teams. So much better than Raikou because it is Spikes immune, which is a big deal. So Raikou, so you got Snorlax, Zapdos, Skarmory, Spiker, right? So Lax, Scarm, Zap. Oh, it also gives you 2 Spikes immunities. Very helpful, even if, which gives you a lot of flexibility in the event that you cannot get rid of Spikes. So you've got Lax, Scarm, Zapdos, Spiker, Special Wall, so Raikou or Blissey, that's still fine, and then Firelax check. Right? So, okay, that's, and where does Suicune go in all of this? And now you see the problem. If you want to have the Firelax check in that last slot, if you want to have everything, because you can use the Firelax check over the Special Wall, but then you don't have the Special Wall. So, I guess it depends on what you think you can get away with. Like if your fire, like here's one thing I thought of. I'm not sure about it 100%, but if your Firelax check is Rhydon, then that also helps against electric moves. So that means you don't necessarily need the Raikou or Bliss. So Snorlax, Skarmory, Rhydon, Spiker, Suicune, and then wait, did I say that right? Snorlax, Zapdos, Skarmory, Rhydon, Spiker, Snorlax, Zapdos, Skarmory, Rhydon, Spiker, and then Firelax check, right? Or no, sorry, because Rhydon is the Firelax check. So and then you can fit in Suicune. So basically, take the team I have here, pretend the T-Tar's a Rhydon, put Zapdos over Skarm, and that's what it would be, right? So yeah, that was one thing I thought of, and I think it could work, but it also feels awkward because you don't have you have to run Rest on Rhydon, or it's terrified of Toxic and you can't have that. And Rest Rhydon without a Heal Beller is going to be really exploitable, especially because there's no Ghost, which means that two turns of sleep without a Ghost to block opposing Rapid Spin, that is going to just make other Fortress super happy, or Cloyster or whatever. And in these Stall Wars, then every little edge of the Spike War is absolutely enormous. So I don't think I would be too comfortable with that, because at least with... I also generally am not super comfortable with running a Rest... if you've got Rest on Snorlax and no Sleep Talk, then I think you gotta have, if not Heal Belt, then you gotta have a Ghost alongside it. So, just because of the same exact thing as Rhydon. And, I mean, if you thought there were a lot of requirements before, then this makes it even worse. So, and this is a good example of, even if you aren't big into GSE or whatever, then this is a good example of when you really, really start super hyper optimizing teams, then you can see how you start ruling things out and how you can start being very critical of what exists if you are trying to take everything into consideration, because it is very difficult to do so if you want to be optimal. So like that's what I mean. Like even things I thought of with even if it did follow that structure of, yeah, it's got the Firelax check and it's got the special. First of all, I don't even think that Rhydon is really acceptable in terms of being quote unquote special check, just because look at how much worse that team would be against Gengar, for example. I mean, you would have to do stupid things like pivot around it with Rhydon and Suicune, which are not Gengar answers. And, Lax would be getting blown up a lot, and then you'd start getting trucked by Zapdos, and it would get ugly. So, it wouldn't just be the Rest versus, Rest without Heal Bell or a Ghost thing. It would be something like that as well. So you've got that. And so now let's go back to the original idea of what if we combined the Lax check into one Pokemon and used Haze, Reflect, Rest Talk, Dragonite, which is the purest counter to anything like that, right? Well, I don't even know if that works, because if you're going to use that set, which does literally no damage, you really need to have that opposing Spikes game locked down. And so then you've got, okay, Lax, Zapdos, Dragonite. You still got your two Spikes immunes, which is nice. Suicune, because we're trying to fit... Or let's leave out Suicune first. Lax, Zapdos, Dragonite, Fortress, and then you've got to fit two of your Special Wall, Suicune, and a Ghost type in there. So you've still got more Pokemon than you do slots. So I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot, because I remember a few years ago, Earthworm brought a team to SPL, which it was really cool in that it had both Suicune and Raikou, which was a famous walling combination for a long time, and it had Raikou and Zapdos. So it was I think it was Lax, Spiker, so Cloyster, Fortress, Lax, Spiker, Skarmory, Zapdos, Raikou, Suicune, which is really cool. And then you realize Firelax destroys it. And I asked him about it after, and he was like, no, I have tools for Firelax. And to this day, I have been thinking about, how do you make that Firelax proof? Like, do you just run Reflect and Toxic on, like, everything? And to this day, I haven't found a satisfactory answer. So it's just, the benefits of Suicune are so great. I mean, especially in modern GSC where Jinx is everywhere. I mean, I would love to fit Suicune in. And you see how on stall teams you would have the similar problem, right? Because Starmie goes in the same slot as Suicune. Because Starmie does not fulfill any of those like hyper necessary functions in terms of things you need to be able to check. It's more about helping you out in the Spikes game on a team where you've got the other threats checked. And that can be done, but you can't do it with Zapdos. And as illustrated in the Zapdos video, as soon as you don't have Zapdos, then you are worse off than if you had Zapdos. So again, it ties into needing Zapdos and not being able to fit everything else as a result. And we're going to skip through the rest of this because I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. Because this game is really long. One of my favorites, though. It's like 5 years old at this point. And this was the first GSC stall team, the first really good GSC stall team I made for myself. And I remember really loving what Suicune did. And I used it again a couple months later in a slightly altered form for a World Cup tiebreaker. And I loved having Suicune. But now, blame Zapdos for being undroppable. If you want to be optimal anyway. So, yeah, God, this game is long, but I enjoyed it. I like long games, and I like but that's a separate video. So yeah, let me know if you agree. I would absolutely love to see Suicune on offense, because I remember like some guys were messing around with. Oh look, Suicune won the game. Hey, I forgot about that. Yeah, but yeah, I remember they were messing around with like Smeargle Suicune offense, which was gimmicky, but hey, maybe there's an offensive Suicune set out there that can do something. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to the debate this will spawn. And I hope that Suicune makes a comeback, because right now, yeah. All right, see you in the next one.